And
So now we're live. We're recording. Okay, good.
and I also enabled live transcripts so we can more easily do minutes.
Good evening, everybody. It's mid-January UNNC Planning and Zoning meeting for January 18th, 2023. Got a good crowd forming here tonight, which is good. So welcome to the Planning and Zoning meeting for the state. And as everyone, I'm going to share the agenda. And sure I get the right one. Does everyone see the agenda?
Yes.
Great. So item number one, as it has been for the past 2.5, 3 years, but it's about to change on March 1st. We'll get to that probably in either public comment or follow up in previous cases. But a determination to hold meetings virtually, which we have to do by law every meeting. The Board of Neighborhood Commissioners and the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, with the guidance from the City of Los Angeles City Attorney, have established that BONC has the authority to adopt AB 361 findings pursuant to Government Code Section 54953 E1BC on behalf of the city's neighborhood councils to determine that due to COVID-19 state of emergency, meeting in person would present imminent risks to the health and safety of attendees. This meeting is now being conducted virtually pursuant to that directive. And I'm going to make probably a comment on that coming up. So welcome. This is the Planning and Zoning Committee for UNNC. We have our bylaws call for that anyone in attendance who is a stakeholder in the meeting is a voting member. Anyone who attends is a participant and who can obviously participate in any form of the conversation. But to be a voting member, one must declare their status as a stakeholder. So with that said, if you wish to introduce yourself and to aver your status as a stakeholder, please do. My name is John Arnold. I'm a resident of Jefferson Park. I am a board member 15 years on the neighborhood council, and I am a stakeholder for the fact that I'm a resident. I'll be voting tonight. Laura.
I'm Laura Myers. I am the co-chair of the UNNC Planning and Zoning Committee. I'm on the board. I'm one of the people who helped establish the neighborhood council 20 years ago, and I live in Angela Vista, and therefore I am a stakeholder.
So I'm just going to get on the line. If you don't want to introduce yourself, please don't. So in order of the people how you entered the room, Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Liz Fuller. I'm a stakeholder. I reside and own a home in West Adams Heights, Sugar Hill.
Great. Teresa.
Hi, everybody. I'm Teresa Masonette. I represent the West Adams Avenues on the board of the UNNC, and I am a stakeholder.
Great. Dorit.
Hey there. I live in Sugar Hill, across the street from Liz, and we own rental property in Harvard Heights. Sorry, not Harvard. Yeah, Harvard Heights. So we are stakeholders for those reasons. Thank you.
Hakeem. Okay, I'll come back to you, Hakeem, if you want to introduce yourself. Evan Laws. If you're not a stakeholder, you can also introduce yourself. So, Cal, go.
Hi there. I'm Evan Laws. I am not a resident or stakeholder, but I am a representative of Harvard Adams Housing Partners LP, which is item number 4 on the agenda. So here to talk to that item and answer any questions from the rest of the group here.
Great, thanks, Evan. Erica.
Hi there, I'm Erica and I work with Evan as well. So I'm also representative of the Harvard Adams Housing Partners and here to talk about the project as well. Great. Nice to meet everyone.
Samantha.
I too work with Evan and Erica here to talk about item number 4.
Great, thank you. Nuriel.
Hey folks, Nuri Mogavam. I live in Harvard Heights. I'm also on the governing board, and I'm here as a stakeholder and intend to vote.
Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Delgado. I'm with the Santa Maria Group. I'm also part of the Harvard Adams project that Evan, Samantha, and Erica have worked with.
Great. Chantel.
Hi, I'm Chantal Daniels, and I'm a part of the West Adam District's a community member.
Great. And giving Donna a second, as soon as her audio connects up. Okay. Hey, Donna, we're just doing introductions. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, it's Donna Jones, West Adams Avenues. I am a
You're many things,
Here
but
we are.
you're a stakeholder.
I'm a stakeholder, and I definitely would like to vote this evening. Thank you. Sorry, I was late.
That's okay. Anyone who didn't introduce themselves wish to? Going once, going twice. Okay, thank you for everybody. So it sounds like we have a lot of, which we suspected, a lot of representation for item number 4, which we'll get to in a minute. First to item number 3 is general comments for anything that's not agendized on the agenda today. Anyone who wants to speak, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Laura, should we talk about Gibson's email today?
Well, the one that told us nothing and was a little parental.
The one that says all meetings under
Yeah.
the Brown Act will now be March
Right.
1st, need to be in person.
Right. Well,
Unless,
Teresa and more Teresa than I have some input, but our committees looks like our committees will continue to be hybrid, and John, only you and I will need to be in person. Other people could be in person, and we'll be back at South CSS, but Teresa has a whole lot more information.
So Teresa, any information? This isn't agendized, so we'll have to agendize it next month, but just so we can start getting the word out. Do you have any information on that?
Just regarding the technical aspects, we're ready to go. The South Seas House has a large television. We're hoping to upgrade it because the pixelation is not that great, but we do have a video conferencing system. And it has a great microphone, a great AI system to recognize people when they're talking. It moves around. It's pretty good, pretty cool. So the board is ready to host committee meetings. The HPOZ group will be holding their meetings there. And so as soon as the decision, if we're going to be hybrid or remain virtual, whatever we're going to do, we're ready to go.
Excellent. So stay tuned, everybody. I think it's what I want to do is make sure that word started getting out, because like me, I'm sure all of us are used to, after 3 years, just going to our computer. So so know that that's happening, and we'll have more meetings, probably the governing board meeting. We'll have it agendized to discuss the fine points of it. We'll certainly agendize it again, either the first or second meeting in February. So stay tuned. And that chapter closing. Any other public comments? Okay, hearing none, going to go to item number 4, which was brought to our attention about 2 months ago. I think it was late November, early December, and we've been trying to get this agendized about this change that's happening to a residential building in Harvard Heights. So the council office has been working with us to get this agendized, and we've been finally able to coordinate with the new, I'm not going to know if it's owners or administrators of this property. So we don't have an agenda how to present this. So, but I think probably the questions that we'll have will come from the Harvard Heights community about what is happening. So I think I can just hand over the mic to any one of the representatives here for the Harvard Adams Housing Partners or the Maria Partners, Santa Maria Partners, to give a presentation. and then to field questions.
John, we should ask, do any of the representatives plan to share the screen? So I need to make you a co-host if yes.
I don't, Erica, were you planning to share a screen or? I was not planning to.
Okay.
I was not as well. I think
Okay.
if there's anything in particular, I could probably pull something up, but I do apologize about that.
Well, John, why don't you unshare the agenda and then if something comes up, I can click as a button, let me change somebody to a.
I mean, probably. I mean, if we want to just have a visual, what the properties are that we're talking about, just if everyone's not familiar.
Then Erica, Erica, you're the right one to co-host.
Oh, I have to
Yeah.
make a co-host?
I would say, Evan, do you want to kick it off, I guess, explaining what we do and
Yeah,
I
I
just
can.
wanna know
but
who wants
It
to
seems like
share.
they're asking for a visual representation of the property itself, though, Erica. To kind of put on the screen, just so everybody has a photo. I don't know if we have a good one off.
give me, if you
Google Maps is fine. We're pretty resilient.
Yep.
Okay,
Give me
see how
one.
that works.
And otherwise, Evan, I guess you're on.
Okay, I can give a general kind of introduction about who we are to start. So the owner representative of the property is Harvard Adams Housing Partners LP. That representative is built up of several different entities, but the main one being Vitus, which is a national affordable housing developer based out of Seattle, Washington, which is where Erica, myself, and Samantha currently reside. Vitus has been in business since 1993, and since that time, we've developed over 15,000 units in more than 100 properties across 30 different states nationwide. Our primary focus on development is the acquisition and rehabilitation of existing Section 8 communities. So projects that have a existing Section 8 HAP contract that limits the resident's income to, or excuse me, the resident's rent to 30% of their income. So we look for these buildings throughout the nation, purchase them through acquisition financing, and then we complete extensive renovations on them through the 4% tax credit program in the state in order to preserve them as quality affordable housing for the residents. So that's what we're doing with Harvard Adams. So it's actually two different sites. One is in Harvard Heights and the other, I believe, is in West Adams. It's a 36 and then a 12 unit property. The 36 unit property is in Harvard Heights. The smaller 12 unit property is in the West Adams neighborhood. And both are existing multifamily Section 8 properties, which we purchased just this last December. And we are in the process of kicking off construction, and that kind of brought us to you guys. So I'll kick it back to Erica, who is our construction manager for this project. So she's going to speak a little bit more toward the construction scope and process, and kind of how we landed at that.
Yep. And I have the Google Maps up. Do you want me to pull up Harvard?
Well, we don't see. Yes, I mean, if it's share.
I have it, Erica. If you want to just start talking, I'll share it.
Okay, sorry. Technology is not my strong suit. I apologize about that. So Harvard and Adams are both, so they're considered a scattered site. We're going to be doing typical rehabs here. We're going to be renovating the kitchens, bathrooms, flooring, paint. We're going to get new HVAC, water heaters, a full Energy Star package, as well as these are small sites, so there's not much we could do with these sites. Adams especially significantly small, but we will be making accessible ADA upgrades, and then exterior improvements. So that's really kind of the gist of it in terms of what's going on with the rehab. Sorry, I'm just seeing your map. There it is. So Harvard is the larger one. That one does have a space where we'll be putting in some kind of playground area. Adams does not have the space to do it. They do have a laundry room and not a community space. They have a laundry room there where we'll be upgrading the accessible path. Harvard does have room for a community space, so we'll be upgrading that as well. Yep, that's it right there. Yep, so there's 4 buildings. Yep, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then in that middle part, you can kind of see that round circle. That's kind of where exactly where the playground area will go. And then you can't tell, but there is parking below these apartment units. Adams as well has parking at the property below the buildings. And so those areas will be upgraded as well. There is street parking available, but these properties have their own parking. Is there any questions that I could help answer?
Hi, I have a question. I'm just kind of curious. Does that scope of work include like retrofitting for earthquake?
So I believe these areas were not required for that. I do know that we went through the permitting process and we weren't necessarily required to, but I will have to double check with the seismic valves, what's required there.
Okay. And then when it comes to making these repairs, are there any interior repairs to the units?
Yeah, we'll be doing full kitchen, bathroom upgrades, flooring throughout the units, HVAC, water heaters, Energy Star, light fixtures, as well as appliances, stuff inside.
Okay. And last question, how will this impact the current residents?
In terms of
that, in terms of like a relocation, Hakeem?
You answer that question as honestly as you can.
Yep, of course. So we don't plan to permanently displace any of the residents that are at our properties. It's kind of a Vitus, one of our guidelines, or I guess one of the things that we, come into projects sticking to is that we never plan to displace the residents that are existing. Our goal is really just to preserve the housing for those residents. And so throughout the process here, we've submitted documents to both the tax credit agency and HUD, which is one of the financing partners on this project, in addition to the Section 8 contract holder. We've submitted relocation materials and been approved for a relocation plan to move the residents out for the period that their unit is being renovated, and then bring them back to the property once those renovations are complete. So we have identified temporary housing outside of the property that is a similar accommodation to what they would have at the property in an extended stay with kitchens, so that the residents have cooking capabilities. And then we've hired movers to assist residents, as we know that it's not fair to obviously put that upon the residents themselves. So we've got a commercial moving company hired in order to assist with that. So they'll be moving resident belongings to storage that are not necessary for the residents to keep throughout their time away from the property. And then once they return, they'll be coming back to a fully renovated unit in their original unit that they left.
And what is the construction timeline? And then I'll pass it to Dory over there.
Erica, this one's 8 months, correct?
Yeah, Harvard and Adams is 8 months, correct.
And I will say that's not the time period that the residents are going to be out of their units. The way that the GC is, or the contractor is doing the construction, they're phasing construction. So when a block of units is taken from the property, it'll be, I think it's 4 to 5 units at a time will be moved off site. Then the contractor will work through those units. It's expected that tenants will be out of their units for 21 calendar days, and then they will be moved back to the property once the unit is complete.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass it to Dory.
All right, I have a couple questions. Love the idea of this happening if it happens right. You had said you buy Section 8 buildings. Are you saying that everyone in this building currently has a Section 8 voucher, or is it a project-based Section 8?
It's a project-based Section 8.
Okay. the relocation, that's great, but if the relocation causes distress or anything like that with, say, someone's general commute, will you be helping out with, say, extra bus passes or things like that?
Yeah, we've already had some comments with regard to the plan. Just, the nature of Los Angeles housing, temporary housing is not really easy to find. So we've submitted relocation questionnaires to all of the residents at the property, and we're in the process of collecting those right now. I think there's only about 10 outstanding between the two properties. And so we're reviewing those just to make sure that all accommodations are met. If a unique circumstance comes up where a resident, needs to either stay at a secondary hotel, stay at the property for a different duration of time and shift their unit later in the construction plan, or stay with friends and family and not utilize the housing that we're planning to offer, then those are being considered and we'll incorporate those into the plan moving forward.
So I just want to go back to it. So you say this building is currently, every single person in this building has Section 8. Everyone is already Section 8 qualified. So everyone who's there will get the chance to come back. Nobody will be not allowed back because their income would be too high.
Yep, that is the plan.
Super duper. Are you going to obviously have to have a manager on site because that's a big old building. Will you also have spaces for case management and the like, a case manager's office, or you don't expect to have that population that needs that?
I don't know if, excuse me, I don't know if we'll need that. We just were kind of allowed to communicate with the property as of December when we purchased. The seller was a little bit hesitant to allow interaction, and the management agent switched at the time of acquisition. So I think that'll be something that'll need to be, addressed moving forward as we learn more about the resident population here and kind of are able to communicate more with them.
Who is your management company you're going to be working with? Or are you guys a management company?
It's a third-party manager. It's Aperto Incorporated. They're a management company based out of California. They have several other. It's APERTO Inc.
Also, could you spell the name of your agency? I know you said it, but I couldn't figure out how to spell that. Sorry.
Of course, it's Vitus, VITUS.
I think I've taken enough time with my questions. Thank you so much for answering them.
Liz?
Just a few clarifying questions. Are you doing this in all of the building or all of the units in the complex? And if so, how many total residents does this affect? And then third and finally, what effect does this have on their current rents? Are they returning to the exact same units at the exact same rent?
So I'll address the rent question first. And I can get Samantha, could you look up the resident population that's being affected by the relocation? Sorry, I don't have that off the top of my head. But with regard to the rent question, so because these are Section 8 properties and 100% of the units are covered by the Section 8 HAP contract, each resident only has to pay 30% of their income. So they would only have to pay more in rent if their income were to increase. And there will be, as a part of this transaction, there is a renewal of the HAP contract, which includes a markup to market on the rents, but that gap between the residents' 30% of their income and the rent levels of the property is paid by HUD. That's how the Section 8 contract works. And residents will be returning to their exact same units as a plan within the relocation. And then in terms of total number, let's see if I can pull that up.
And it will be, Evan, are you trying to get like a total count of tenants? Because it will be every unit at both properties that are affected.
Yeah, apologies.
Yeah. Or that they will all get the same work done to their units is what I'm getting at.
And I know I have that information. Might just take a little bit of time to find it.
John, Teresa, that's her hand, John.
Teresa?
And Evan, just keep looking for what you're looking for.
Will do.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions and a couple of comments. A majority of the area of Harvard Heights is HPOZ. But it appears that this structure may not be a contributing building. You did mention that you are doing some exterior work. Is it still, or I would like to request that you still meet with the HPOZ board just to work with them on the color choices and any, other exterior work that's possible. The building on Adams is on the other side, which is really Jefferson Park. So, and they don't have HPOZ in that area. So I don't know if maybe Laura or John can.
Yeah, you are right. Harvard, we did go through the HPOZ review during our permitting process, and they ultimately cleared us. So there wasn't anything that we had to. They didn't call out anything specific, but that's good to know, at least from a historic standpoint with the color choice. And then Adams, we did not have to. So it wasn't part of our required clearances.
Right. On the other side of Adams, the area that I represent and a couple of members on the phone live in, we do have a HPOZ. So I'm not going to stress that you work with us because it's on the other side, but I'm glad to hear that you did reach out to HPOZ, the Harvard Heights HPOZ. And then my other question is, I'd like, this may seem kind of remedial, but I'd like some more understanding on how you make your money. I know that, and maybe Hakeem can give me some clarity on this, that our council member asked for a $16 million bond, and you're going to receive some of this money to renovate these buildings. But how does your company make money? Evan, maybe you can answer that, or Hakeem, you can confirm that information on the bond and that whole thing.
Well, I can clarify that the bonds are not issued by the City of Los Angeles. However, the statutory process in order for the proprietor to have access to those bonds requires the City of Los Angeles to hold a hearing at the City Council to establish that if there are any protests for those bond opportunities. And that's what our office has done. It doesn't guarantee that the city is giving them any money. Those bonds were sought on the private market, but the benefit being to the City of Los Angeles, hence the public hearing.
Okay, thanks.
And then on our side of things, as the developer in the transaction, we make a fee in accordance with the state tax credit guidelines, which allows us to reinvest money in other affordable properties elsewhere and within the state of California as well. So that's
I would also like to acknowledge Lauren Delgado, who I've worked with through this process to give some elucidating clarification.
Yeah. So just to clarify, so these are tax exempt bonds issued by the state, and how it works is the state requires that whatever jurisdiction that project is located in, hold that public hearing. But those bonds are issued directly from the state. They're funds that the state treasurer allocates toward public benefit projects such as affordable housing, healthcare, and education. But what happens with these bonds is it gets allocated to a certain amount for the sake of the project. So it's per unit, and I don't know what that amount is. There is a set developer fee that gets allocated from those bonds to the developer, but it's limited and it's set forth by the state, by the standards of the state. And a portion of those bonds also go back to the city. So whenever any outside issuer who is the conduit issuer of these state bonds to any city issues these bonds, they also issue a percentage of those bonds back to the city. So the city does get some of that money back as well.
Great. Which is thank you very much.
Of course.
And just to answer Liz's question, it is 103 resident between the two properties.
Well, I'm actually Liz's question in the chat. I think it was Liz's. You did not work with what we would say work with the HPOZ mean you go to the HPOZ board in a public meeting and you present and they vote to approve the conforming work. You didn't do that because apparently the Office of Historic Resources decided to delegate this project to themselves. So it was a delegated project. I feel, while that probably was 100% legal, it feels a little inappropriate given it's also public money. And you might consider reaching out to the HPOC planner and having a meeting like this with that board. It's a 7-member board and it's a well-attended public meeting. Maybe also talk about. Because I think some of the questions we've been hearing over the month would have been not questions that had this project not been delegated. But I see it was approved in here. That's a long time ago for people not to have, knowing.
Of course.
Not your fault and not illegal. I'm just saying you might want to take a visit like this to the HPOZ as well.
So I heard, Erica, you said earlier that the project did get a CCMP and was reviewed by HPOZ?
I'm reading it now, Hakeem. It's reviewed by the planner only.
I think my computer is, so
there was no requirement for a hearing for that one?
yeah, there was no requirement. So it was part of, when we submitted and we got our list of clearances required, HPOZ came up and it was I think there was a couple comments. It wasn't that they had nothing to say, but it was a fairly straightforward review with them and a quick sign off.
Did they provide a CCMP letter? Is the property actually historically designated, first of all? Is it in, okay, it's not. And is it in the actual HPOZ?
Yeah, Hakeem, I can answer that. I'm looking at the letter. It's online in Xeris. They got a letter, but it's a delegated letter.
Okay. Well, I mean, it was reviewed and cleared.
Sure.
And you're saying that it's
perfectly legal.
Go to the board?
I'm saying just as a matter of courtesy at this point, it's 6-7 months later.
Mm-hmm. And I'm happy to do that. Our exterior scope may be Harvard if we're adding a playground, but it is minimal to repairs. And if we are replacing, it's replaced kind. So won't be anything too drastic, but I'm happy to look into that for sure.
Yeah, and as you guys are pulling permits for that construction, if anything were to be triggered by building and safety, it would be, kicked back to the HPOZ board anyway, right?
Yeah, I've become very familiar with the permit office. So yeah, I've talked to many of those folks there. So, but yeah, I'll double check that, make sure we're doing everything correct, and we don't want to upset anyone with this.
I have a question. Was this formerly totally private, no covenants on the affordability, and now it's turning into a covenant situation where there's actually going to be a covenant on the property? It needs to be affordable for X many years. And if that's the case, does it get recertified? It's not recertification. When it gets something in 20 or 25 years, is that the process this project is now in? So as a public, kind of quasi-public housing?
Yeah, I mean, so previously, I think the overlay on the project in terms of affordability was just the Section 8 housing contract, or for both sites. So, through our acquisition, we renewed that contract for an additional 20 years. And then on top of that, there is a affordability extension for the previous term of the HAP contract. So say I think this one was less than 6 months. So it's not too long, maybe a couple months, but on top of that, because this project incorporates tax credits and it's gone through the tax exempt bond issuance process through the city, there is and Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's a 50-year affordability restriction from both the tax credit agency and the bond issuer at this stage. So that for the next 50 years, this project will remain affordable. And then it's, it's a very likely situation that affordability will be continually extended. Usually people don't like to cancel the Section 8 HAP contracts on properties. So because it's a hard program to start anywhere. So
Yeah.
So the next time we might see this property come up at a future planning and zoning committee will be about 20 years. What's it called when they recertify? There's a different word for it. Into the sea. It's can't think what it is. But anyway, so there'll be another process when it gets recertified, that there'll be another round of upgrades and TCAP.
Re-syndication, I think, is what you're saying.
Re-syndication, thank you. I knew it was a Zurich. So when it's re-syndicated, that will be probably 20 years, and there'll be another round of upgrades, and otherwise it's going to be pretty static for about 20 years, barring anything unusual.
Yeah, other than obviously constant operating and maintenance. Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
I've got another question, but Laura, you actually use the hand button, so you go first.
I was just going to make a comment. I'm quickly skimming through the plans and everything. So one thing that UNC really talked about on all projects is trees, and all we can say is we want more of them, and we want them as best as possibly native. I see in your project, the only thing you have on trees is a $7,000 allowance for trimming them. At least what I'm seeing in the plans, looking real quickly. So are there any plans for making more of them, having more shade, helping us breathe better?
Yeah, so and I apologize, Laura, I for some reason can't hear you that well. Is this in regards to landscaping trees? Is that correct?
Right. It's adding trees, anything with trees. I see it's very small amount that you have.
It is a small amount, but these are pretty small properties. At the same time, we have budgets to work off. So what we also have is contingency at some point, and we have wish list items. So that's definitely what we typically put towards, our wish list, once we get through the project, get through any unforeseen items, then we hit that list, and landscaping usually is what comes up, and we spruce those properties up pretty nicely. I will say, these existing properties have actually pretty incredible landscaping already. The previous maintenance or management company kept those properties up very well. I think there's fruit trees and palm trees, and they have some pretty exotic plantings already. So it actually might be a little difficult to find some space. But yes, we have a pretty good idea of what we can do with the contingency if we need more than that 7,000.
Okay. I have a question. Do you know if Vitus is a developer that will be holding on to this property, or is the plan to complete the build out reposition once it's re-tenanted and the covenants are extended and selling? How does that work? What's the plan there?
So Vitus is a buy and hold developer. So we'll be, we acquired the property, we'll complete the renovation, and then we'll plan to hold it for, at least the 10-year compliance period through the tax credits, typically longer.
Liz?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's a link somewhere where we could see the plans and what they've got in mind for the exterior and things.
Yeah, I think, Laura, you're probably looking at from on the public website.
I was looking at the website.
And I can also send a link to Lauren, who could probably pass it on to Akeem as well.
So I will put what I have, but sometimes what happens is that the links in Zemus, once you start going to looking at plans, are unique to your own computer. So I will put what I think is the case file link into the chat, and hopefully that will take you where you want to go, where they'll have a few things in there. Otherwise, it's Zemus.
That's it.
That does work?
It works.
Okay.
Teresa,
So that has the letter, the letter that approves it, and also has a link for the approved plan.
This was the HPOZ review.
The letter is this is the HPOC review.
Mhm.
But again, the HPOC staff review, not the board, it's just, again, not their fault, but it just wasn't very transparent. And it's perfectly okay. John can explain better than me because he was the chair of an HPOC board.
so the only thing that our planner did is before every meeting, he or she went down the entire, everything that was delegated in that month to the planning department. So everyone knew that, this number address would come up, so this was delegated because. So I'm not sure if that happens in Harvard Heights, but it does happen in Jefferson Park. So it doesn't happen in Harvard Heights. Just so you know what's going on, even if it's delegated, that should be suggested to your board or planner or both.
John, is it typical that when there is no structural changes or no additions that the ADM administrative review applies? Because typically when you see ADM, there's no discretion, right? And usually when you have a CCMP application, there's some level of discretion there. So I think maybe, as long as they comply with the standards of the Secretary of Interior's standards for the treatment of historic assets or historical buildings for doors and windows, which it seems the scope of work here seems to suggest that the staff level will be able to review that and stipulate the issuance of that clearance based on the standards of the Secretary of Interior.
Well, it's not that. It's based on every HPOZ has its own preservation plan, and so then there's a list in the plan itself. There's a list of things that can be delegated to staff.
Got it.
Depending on the community, staff often says, "No, I'm going to take it all the time to the community because I don't like to deal with the stress of people complaining that I didn't." It just depends on the situation. So this is not exempt. In the preservation plan, there's also a list of things that are exempt from review. This is not that. This is one of those that could have gone either way. And the reason it could have gone either way is that on the one hand, the building or the complex of buildings are non-contributors. And on the other hand, there's a lot of units and a number of buildings that could have gone either way. And during COVID, more of them didn't go to the board because of just all the technical issues of getting formed and meeting all the time. So again, nothing was done wrong. I'm just saying the project has led to community questions. So these are good answers.
And I would add to that non-contributor status, no apparent structural additions, subtractions, raising up. So it might be paint colors, it might be the play structure in the back, but there's no physical structural changes happening too. So I think those two things intersecting, it's all interiors, which the HPOZ doesn't have control over at all. So I think all those things added up, to me, it seems like a logical thing to be delegated. And if it's not a historic structure, even the paint colors, the planning department in Jefferson Park anyway, delegated most paint. If it was just about paint colors, it was delegated. So, but it will vary, as Laura says. Teresa, I'm keeping an eye on the clock. We have two other items. So, but Teresa.
Thanks, John. I'll be quick. I just want to chime in with what Laura said about the trees. This part of Los Angeles is bereft of tree canopy. So hopefully you do not have to remove any of the trees that are there, even the palm trees, which are not my favorite, but we'd like for you to make every effort to retain the canopy that is there. And if by chance you do have to remove the tree, normally it's a 2-for-1, but I would like to ask you to reach out to this committee so we can identify that tree and give you some suggestions on the best replacement. Putting in a 15-gallon or even a 24-inch box tree is not going to give you the same benefits of having a larger tree. So I would just like to make that request. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add that as a friendly, be part of the community suggestion, because it's one of our top items to make sure that all projects start contributing to our tree canopy. So I'm just going to support what Teresa just said with a little bit of nuance to it. Calling user number 1, your hand's been raised for a while. If you wish to speak.
Good evening. I wanted to know, as a courtesy, did you invite the residents of this project to this community meeting so that if they were interested to see how you are presenting this project to the community? Thank you.
Thanks.
Was that a question for us or for the representative?
I think representatives.
Yeah, I would imagine that's a question for us. We did not. This information has been presented to the residents. Previously, we actually held a tenant meeting on the 18th of November last year, prior to the acquisition, where we ran through the construction and the relocation plan for the project, invited tenant comment, and then subsequently we also had, as Lauren and Hakeem had mentioned, the TEFRA meeting, which is a standard meeting for these types of projects involving tax exempt bonds, where the project was brought to city council, and we invited the residents of the property to attend that meeting, which was obviously a public comment situation, but it it slipped our mind to invite them to this one. So it wasn't done intentionally, but we did not, to answer the question sincerely.
And just to add to that, prior to us closing and owning the property, at the seller's request, we were not, other than the tenant meeting that we were allowed to have, he didn't allow us to have any discussions directly with residents.
And just to contribute to that as well, anytime there's a neighborhood council meeting, we just rely on the public notice there for any project that I know I've worked on personally. We've never really let residents know. It just, there's a notice that gets sent out if they're paying attention to these notices. And to add to that, this was kind of a last minute thing, getting added to the agenda, but had we known, we would have invited the residents, absolutely, if that was something you guys had wanted.
As a personal commentary, I hope that you get a recording of this meeting and listen to the responses you just made. These changes that are going to be affecting their lives, that they should not be notified. I find it very interesting. Developers and project engineers consider community outreach, not including the people that it will be directly affecting. Thank you. I hope you will consider to invite residents of this project and any future project to any meeting. Information, knowledge is information, is power. I'm sorry that you don't feel that way. Thank you.
Nuriel.
Yeah, thanks. Just wanted to, I think, partway respond to that in my own thoughts as a governing board member. I think as we seek to better represent our neighborhood council, bring people into the system, improve the awareness of our neighborhood council for people who live here and our relationship with the community. I don't know if we have a regular process for inviting people who are directly affected by properties that we're hearing on, but I do sense that we should be the ones inviting people to our neighborhood council meeting. So I don't know if it's a thing we do, and if not, it might be for the next year or something, maybe a process for us to think through how best to do that, especially when we do add things onto our agenda short notice, whether there's any notification. This is 2 blocks away. I could have walked down at least and even put a flyer, knocked on some doors, but for the future, I think it's a reasonable point, if it's not part of our regular process, to make it.
Thanks, Nuriel. It's like what I heard from what the applicant, what the property owner said. The tenants are informed with the information that we got tonight. Is that true? Yes. So there's no information that we got tonight that the tenants haven't already gotten, if not more.
That is correct. Outside of this meeting, we are required by law to obtain a THP permit. And what that means is we have a relocation plan that all residents are aware of. And they are aware of all the work being done. By law, they are notified and they need to know. So they do know what is happening and everything we're discussing.
So I think a larger point for UNNC, I mean, we routinely, if a address is on our agenda, we don't notify people at that address. That's but to your point, Nuriel, I think there's a good lesson here for us to reach out to deeper into our community, to people who may not have access to UNC's information, just so there would automatically be a word getting out to someone who's signed up to our planning list. So I think there's a dual thing here that could be that's a lesson here. So we'll do what we can to spread that word. Chantel.
I'm a community member and a tenant, and I appreciate the last caller's comment as well as your response. But in speaking in regards to the THP, what's on the THP is very minimal compared to the conversation here. So I could witness to that there's a major difference between the level of communication, because you're often shut out from inspectors or THP staff providing information. I know when I asked for information, I was stonewalled. I couldn't get any information from management or from the city. So I think in navigating those, or just in thinking about this project and future projects, it's not really the same in terms of the communication, because what's on the THP on the paper can often be very different from what you experience, in my experience. And I'll just limit it to that. I think it alarms me to some sense, because there can be such challenges between management and tenants in navigating this kind of project. So my question would be, is there also a person who is helping the tenants as well as management navigate this, who are responsive and who also provide answers to questions in a reasonable amount of time as well? And then my other comment is that it took me a while to even get privy to this meeting, or that these meetings were taking place. So I don't know what opportunities there may be in terms of culturally reaching the community, because I think much more people would support having a forum to ask questions and to really find out the ongoings in the community, so that we could all sit together and thoughtfully think about whether that fits for the community or how we can contribute toward a peaceable solutions going forward in projects like these.
Excellent. Thank you, Chantel. Those very thoughtful remarks. Laura.
Yes, and then
to that.
I'm going to make a remark that we also need to, like you said, John, move on to another two items. But I will say that in UNNC's outreach and separately communications committees, those are two different committees that are not planning and zoning committee. One of the challenges discussed all the time is how to better reach people who are renters in our community. It seems so easy. It's so much easier to reach business owners and or homeowners. I mean, two different groups, because of the associations they also have. And we constantly are talking about how to better reach tenants. So, I'm hearing everything
Yep.
I'm saying, and
So
we'll bring it back to people who need to hear it too.
So I would suggest two things, Laura. If you could put an email or in the chat that Chantel could take for anyone, not that it's a
Oh,
responsibility
sure.
to contact
You mean
your neighbor.
our email?
What would be a good place to connect with UNNC? And then also, if there's an ownership email that could be used to make a connection, or if you guys can connect directly, that would be great if you could use the chat for that. That would be great.
But you know what? I don't know how to sign up to get UNNC emails. I just always have, and I'm the person who sends them. And there's just this list of more than 1,000 people. So maybe if you're in, Chantel, if you want to stay a little while, I'll go on to our UNNC website during the course of this meeting, and I'll see how one signs up for UNNC email.
I'd love to. I'd also like to be a part of the conversation for for some ideas. I know that I'm also a mental health provider, and so I think in terms of community, I think there could be a lot of unity and more safety in the community. So I think in terms of navigating projects like these and also trying to have some sensitivities to the community and getting more people involved, I think that could really help people feel empowered about what's happening around them, especially when it seems like things are being taken away or changed so quickly that it doesn't always leave people the room to have a conversation and invite that conversation in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
So this was easier, luckily easier than I thought to find the link, which I hope is the link to sign up for our MailChimp e-blasts. It says newsletter sign up, but we don't have a newsletter, so this must be news sign up.
So there's a few resources in the chat, ownership representatives, if you could also put a resource in there, just to have a conduit for any stakeholder in the community, tenant or other. Thank you very much. Evan just posted his email in the chat. So I think that's, I think we can move on unless there's any other comments or questions on this topic. So thank you very much. I want to thank everybody who spoke and asked really great questions. We have a great neighborhood council that asks great questions. I appreciate all the, Hakeem, thank you for showing up from CD10. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all the representation from ownership as well. And Chantal, thank you also for attending.
Wait, but the meeting's not over.
I know, I'm just saying for this group.
Yes,
You're well, everyone can stay.
Everybody can stay.
Okay, we're moving on to,
Thank you.
we're moving on to item number 5, which is about AB 2097. And if you've been with this group enough, we know that we are overrun with ABs and SBs, which are assembly bills and Senate bills at the state level. Especially in the past, I'm going to say 3 or 4 years, the state has become, depending on your perspective, very heavy-handed or very proactive to ensure that housing, more housing is doable in the state of California. So Laura and I, our thought was, we had 2 thoughts. One, we could have one session where we could talk about all the state bills and assembly bills that affect housing, and it might affect how things are developed and from a planning and zoning perspective in our community. But we thought we might try doing them one at a time, and especially if we have a slot in the agenda where we can talk about these things. And most of these are not for votes. There's nothing for us to say. They are law. They happen at a state level. The only thing we can do is vote against the person or for the person that voted for them up in Sacramento. So we're just basically here as an educational purpose to just introduce some of these things one by one, and just so everyone gets used to how the dialogue and how developers might be presenting and what they might be, how they might be approaching the developments. And just so we aren't blindsided. And so I get a lot of, Laura and I keep up on these. We want to make sure to the best extent we can that everyone is up on what's coming out of Sacramento, because it's a lot. And every year that goes by, it gets more and more not what we're used to. And when our expectations aren't managed, that's when things get difficult. So
And then also of interest, folks, this one that Jane's presenting actually then relates to the dining al fresco one item right after. So go ahead.
So this one is fairly straightforward, and it might be kind of shocking. I'm going to share my screen a little. I got a little map. I had to intersect Zemus and the UNNC map, but I'm going to show you what this looks like. And basically AB 2097, oops. Yeah, it had it for a second and then it vanished. So hold on.
Wait, John, you work at KFA?
I do.
Oh, I didn't know that. Do you know Josh Foster?
I know him very, very well.
Oh, that's my buddy.
Yeah, Josh. Yeah, he was, hold on, I lost.
Sorry. That's what happens when you have your email on the screen. People get to know you.
I know. No, hold on one second.
Hunting, just FYI, John's a partner.
No. Hold on one second. I clicked off the wrong screen. I got to go find it again. But basically what this bill says, that any community that is in a, they at turns call it transit rich or within a half mile of a major transit stop. Both of those definitions differ depending on what you are, but most of the UNNC area, which I'm going to show you right now, is in a, now I got it back, is in a transit rich area or a half mile from a major transit stop. Most of the city of LA is. So anywhere you see, this is our UNC zone, anywhere you see the saturated color, not the kind of faded color, which is the kind of the strip through the middle that kind of spreads out towards Jefferson Park. Parking is no longer required for any development, commercial or residential, in any of those zones. So house, movie theater, multifamily housing project, a mixed use project, there's no longer any parking required. A city can't require parking. A developer can provide it, it's not forbidden, but a city can't require parking in these areas. And this is what it looks like in the UNNC area. So you can see up here, it's most of, it's all of Crenshaw, all of Western, because they have major transit going up and down them, most of Pico, except for a little chunk right in the middle, most of Washington. And then as we get south into Jefferson Park, a little less transit down there. So they're a pretty good swath of the western part of Jefferson Park that is not part of this rule. And what this means is that a developer can choose not to have any parking. What it means in reality is, even though the city won't require it, most developers for their projects will provide it to make whatever market they're trying to reach attractive to their development, because developers aren't in the business of building things, they're in the business of renting things. And if they can't rent it, they won't rent it, or their rents will be lower. So I work with developers all the time. I know that market rate developers still want some parking, otherwise they won't be able to get the tenants. I think some of affordable housing developers, if it's 100% affordable, they may not have much parking in their projects coming up. Commercial developers, they don't want to have a dead commercial space because no one goes there because there's no parking. So I think there's legal aspects of this, but there's also reality aspects of it. But what won't happen anymore in any of these areas that are saturated, on any project that we get, will not have required parking X. It's going to be required parking 0. So that said, this is a discussion only. This is a done deal. It passed last September. And it went into effect on January 1. The City of Los Angeles Planning Department is responsible for implementing this law. So if you look on Zemus, things have already changed. They've already have an AB 2097 tab where you can see if a parcel is subject to this, and they're already reviewing projects under this lens. So I'm not an expert on this. I just see it as it comes down. But if we want to have a discussion, I have some experience in the development world, and maybe we can, but I'm not sure what's on people's minds. Anybody? Teresa.
Hey, John, I'd just like to know, how was that decision made? Like the shaded area, You see the avenues and it seems like it ends at 10th. How was that? Who made those decisions? When did that happen?
So this was, I took a deep dive into Zemus and I clicked on parcels and see where the lines were because it wasn't quite clear. And finally, what I got was any zone that was a TOC, any tier, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So any TOC zone, which would be anything, any zone within a half mile of a transit stop. So not a major transit stop under TOC because the state defines it differently. So you can see, let's just, if you can see my cursor, you can see this arc that arcs through Jefferson Park. That's centered around this point at Adams and Western. That means there's a bus on Adams and a bus on Western that fits the state's definition within a half mile of a major transit stop. But you can see the bus that goes down Jefferson that intersects the same bus on Western does not apply. I know for a fact that Exposition, there's the arc of the circle from Exposition arcs right down this lower quadrant of Jefferson Park. It just doesn't hit the UNNC zone. And the same thing goes for all these you see all these circles that are concentric around points along Crenshaw. That means there's a bus intersection at Crenshaw, Pico, Crenshaw, Washington, Crenshaw, Adams. So that's where those zones, how they were made. It's a good question because I had to go search for it myself. And I had to do it click by click just to see the patterns that were happening.
The metric is that there are 2 intersecting bus lanes or bus lines or major transit stations. And that could be the station platform to a train station. And then a half a mile as the crow flies in a straight line radius of that. But if you're going to use a bus line, it has to have 2 bus lines that intersect each other that have a north-south and a east-west interval of 15 minutes.
And
I can see, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, John. I can see where that would be the case on Adams and 9th and 10th, because there is that another bus there, and further down on Crenshaw, there are all kinds of buses that cross that area. So I get it. Thanks.
So, and a lot of the laws that are already in place, like the ADU law or the affordable housing laws, which no parking is required. There are already laws that didn't require parking or much parking, but now those just got a little more widespread. And I think even now an ADU won't need any parking, and a single family house doesn't need any parking. I'm not sure what it does to past laws like having covered parking. I think they all go away, but I'm not sure about that. Well, that will all be vetted as things come about when garages get removed, or but I'm not sure. Any other questions, points of discussion? Thank you, Teresa. Good question.
Nuriel.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say for my part, I kind of think it's great. I'm somebody who partly chose to move to this area because it's so connected to transit, and been living just fine without a car the last 6 months because there is pretty good connectivity. I take the bus to get to work and can use, the 33 or the 207 to get to a lot of places I need. And for things I don't, there's always rideshare. But what that means, for my immediate community, it's one less car on the road, and it's one less car out in the street. And, I think for these areas where we can actually provide, more transit for people, and so people don't need to have the car, it also means that the space that would be taken up by my car is also used for other things. And so, if this allows for people to move here who have more demand for transit, then we maybe have actually more transit in the area, more frequent buses, a few people with cars. And, cars are going to be really important for a lot of folks who, need to get to certain places or have certain commutes, or their health requires it. But, for other folks, being able to have better mobility through public transit is pretty nice. And we can use that space that we currently give to cars that are idling, back to the community and wider sidewalks or something else. So I'm fine with it. And I think John's point too, that, at the end of the day, the market's going to kind of decide where we do and don't need parking. I think it's still going to prevail anyway. So, again, I'll say from my point, I think it's a welcome change.
Thanks, Nuriel. I generally try not to give too many opinions because I'm the chair of this committee, but I agree with you. I think it's an antiquated sense that you have to keep just providing more parking, which only provides more traffic. And actually, it's costly. You know, a parking stall in a garage costs $60,000-$70,000 these days. So at making the requirement that parking is required only ups the cost for everybody, and it actually allows for more choice to have a car or not. Because if you choose not to have a car, you don't pay for it. If you choose to have a car, you figure out where you're going to park it. And as Nouriel said, the market will take care of that. Or more people will choose not to have cars, which to my mind only improves our quality of life by not having as much traffic, having more public property for trees and sidewalks and bikes. And so I am with you with that, Nouriel, and I do believe the market will take care of itself without the restriction from the planning department.
So John, can we do 5 more minutes on this?
Yeah, I think we're Nouriel, your hand went back up. Do you have another comment?
Yeah,
Well,
just
Chantel went up.
Yeah, just one more thing I wanted to add, just in case folks are more data minded. So in our UNNC footprint, about 15 to 20% of people don't own a car. It's higher in Harvard Heights than in the other sections, and about 25% of people walk, bike, or take public transit to get to work. So we already actually have, relative to the rest of LA, like a more transit oriented and less car owning population. So I think, you know, continuing to acknowledge that and continuing to focus on transit, I think is like a big thing that we could be doing as a neighborhood. So again, thanks.
Thank you, Nouriel. Chantel, your hand is still up. Did you have something else to say, or was that left over from last?
No, you put it back up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm very new to this group, so I don't want to, I just want to listen and kind of take some things in, but I couldn't be quiet on this one because for the last year I sold my car and I took a hiatus from driving to support the environment, to get a little bit more in shape. And I was walking to Planet Fitness, and just to see what it was like in our city in real time, to experience the community and what was available in terms of transportation. What I found was quite interesting. We do have accessibility with the bus systems. It was fine. There are some opportunities there, and the train is definitely accessible. I also love to take long drives, so I'll be more succinct and brief on this, but I love long drives. So in the interim, I was occasionally renting a car, and sometimes I would drive as far out as Laguna Beach. And what I loved about the culture there was they do have like a trolley. I don't know if it's supported by the community, and I don't know if that fits within Los Angeles in terms of how we operate. But it was just kind of nice to know that whether you had a car or not, that there was this option that you could take advantage of and still find your way around the city and enjoy it. While also, if you did have a car, you could park it. If you didn't, you could use the bus system or the tram system, and then access the trolley to get you back to your car, or things like that. So I just wanted to mention that. I don't know if it helps as much, but I just wanted to mention it because even if someone does have a car to store, some of the bus stations do have that. I don't know if our city would lend itself to something like that. So I'm just thinking through this. It was just something that went through my mind, so I figured I would share it.
Thank you. That was a great comment. And actually you could tell that I chose to spoke up and Nouriel chose to spoke up, and as did you, which we appreciate and applaud. That starts to move the needle of the discussion about what does a city look like that has fewer cars. And so I think anytime any of us takes that jump into a different experience of the city, it just starts opening the doors rather than what we knew before. And I think and the problem has been identified at the state level, and this is a result of that, along with many other things. So I appreciate your comment, Chantel, and I would really love for you to come back and continue to contribute. Teresa.
I just have a comment on old business when that comes up.
Okay, we have one more item. So before we move on to from item 5, any other comments on item 5? Okay, moving on. Next item is Lars. Lars, if you could take the.
It's not my first.
It's you're the champion of this item.
Well, perhaps, can you see, I shared the screen, the presentation from the planning department. Is
Yes,
it visible?
we can see it.
Okay, of course. Okay, good. So basically the planning department is, I'm going back there, creating a permanent outdoor dining al fresco ordinance. So when COVID hit, they created a temporary ordinance that has allowed for the last couple of years restaurants to move their tables and chairs, tents, heating elements outdoors. But as the emergency declaration is coming to an end, City Council directed the planning department and other departments to create permanent law. So this supported restaurants and offered healthy dining. Well, we don't know what things were on the menu, but healthy air during dining during COVID emergency, and it included dining on private property, sidewalks, curbside, and in the street. So why I'm saying it that way and why it's on the presentation is that that involves multiple city departments, not just the planning department. So they're setting the last day of the COVID emergency as also the last day for any restaurant to apply for a temporary permit, and that's only going to be valid for 6 months. And it's essentially a grace period to allow restaurant operators to apply for permanent outdoor dining permits. So the planning department only governs outdoor dining on private property. So that includes the parking lots and also little areas right in front of the restaurant before you get to the sidewalk and the public right of way. Oops, I'm sorry. And so this is what if you can see that slide, there's sidewalk dining, which would be like right outside the windows or doors of a restaurant, dining in the street, dining, which is taking up a lot of street space. What they're calling curbside dining, I think really it's kind of the same thing as in the street, takes up less space. And then there's expanded outdoor private property dining is in the parking lot. And what they're not showing in this slide would essentially be dining on this edge of the sidewalk, so edge of the sidewalk before you hit the street. And I'm not sure why the slide's not showing that. And I don't think we need to see the proportion, but essentially the Bureau of Engineering oversees outdoor dining that's on the sidewalk. The Department of Transportation oversees outdoor dining in the street. And so if anybody wants to do either of those, they need to, in the public right of way, they need to renew revocable permits. On the private property, both the Department of City Planning and the Department of Building and Safety oversee outdoor dining in the parking lots or other private property spaces. And this is going to mostly be by right. The discretionary approvals have either if a restaurant wants to do something different, or if they're serving alcohol and their current permit for the alcohol does not include the outdoor spaces. So they would have to go back and get different permits for that. I'm bringing this up, or we're bringing this up because there's a February 8th public hearing. So if UNNC is going to want to comment on this, we'll have to vote on our comment on February 2nd at our governing board meeting. So they have some very specific standards that the outdoor dining is not larger than 50% of the indoor dining already on the ground floor of the restaurant. The standards differ by zone. The outdoor dining is not allowed by right in the parking lots currently, but in the proposed new definition, right-hand column, the standards will be the same in every zone. And the outdoor dining is going to be allowed by right in parking lots up to 5 spaces. It can take away up to 5 parking spaces. how that intersects the item we just looked at is that if there is no longer any required parking, it may allow more outdoor dining in parking lots, but that will require say it's a little mini mall and there's 3 restaurants. The owner of the mini mall is the one who's going to have to also allow not just a restaurant. And the owner of the mini mall might want to retain parking for his or their other tenants. So, and I'm getting an internet connections unstable message, so I'm going to do this as fast as I can. And they're basically having design requirements that include defining how much open space from the ground to the top of the structure. They don't want walls that are higher than 41 inches, for example. So they want it to be really outdoors, not just a new structure separate from the original structure. And good neighbor policies, they're putting in hours of operation between, basically, if it's near a residential zone, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. So that's kind of a long period anyway, and no outdoor entertainment. So there was a webinar today from 12 to 1. If anyone's really interested, I think the recording will be made available to people who participated, and then since I was listening, I will get it, and so you can email John or myself, and we can share the recording with you. But there will be a public hearing on February 8th from 6 to 8 p.m. and the deadline for making comments is February 24th. So I'm gonna, for the moment, leave this last slide up on the screen and tell you that where some of the objections have been from the community. One is that this will overlay any overlay zone. So HBOZ, specific plans, if there's anything in those plans that currently address eating outdoors, it goes away. This ordinance will be on top, a layer on top of it. So that's one thing people, the Ventura Boulevard specifically objecting to that, for example. I don't think that affects us too much. Another big question was trees. Is the furniture for dining going to take priority over maintenance of trees? And they have no answer for that. And then the other thing that people were talking about, obviously, was the noise and outdoor entertainment. So, John, should I take this down because I think my internet is unstable? Has everybody got this email?
Yeah, I think planning. Take it down. This is also posted in the agenda packet.
I don't think I had that in the agenda. In our agenda packet, we have a fact sheet, we have this PowerPoint presentation, we have the hearing notice, and 3 or 4 other things. So there's a lot of information inside the agenda packet in the Google Drive, and that link is on our agenda. Hakeem has his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to share with you that your councilwoman, Heather Hutt, is now the chair of the Transportation Committee of City Council. And there are 2 items actually for Alfresco. One associated with the program and transitioning it to a permanent program, and another one relative to the fees that would be collected for the implementation of the permit. She has selected that this program will be coming up for her transportation committee as an item for discussion, public comment, and a vote to advance recommendations to the city council. The city council has already met on this project and voted with recommendations and sent it back to the transportation committee and public works. So it would be helpful if you all could, recommend some things for the councilwoman to consider in a community impact statement or a letter that really states your neighborhood's position on these things.
Well, the one thing that really struck me when I saw the presentation on Saturday from the planning department is how they kept saying, but wait, the transportation department's going to have its own set of rules, and the Bureau of Engineering will have its own set of rules, and building safety will have their own set of rules. And it's like, wait a minute, I think the city council told you guys to all work together and play nice. And wouldn't it make more sense to have a single ordinance and a single set of rules in one place? So one thing that was addressed today in the webinar was that they think they're going to have a single portal where if a person wanted to apply, they go into the portal and then they have to spread out between the departments. But I just feel like it just is a little nonsensical to end up with multiple ordinances. Then there should be a single one. And I guess on a personal note, I am noticing that my friends, my family, we are now seeking out restaurants that offer outdoor dining, which is not something I think any of us thought about so seriously before. So, from a stakeholder point of view, I think people like this, at least over here. But I was hearing at these few sessions I attended, the criticism of that it's overlaying the overlay zones.
Yeah, and my understanding, Laura, is that one of the ordinances was going to be directly related to folks who took advantage of alfresco over the pandemic and transitioning them into a more permanent use on private land. And then the other one is relative to the engineering department, which looks at B permits and right-of-way permits along the public right-of-way. And that's the one that has more influence from Bureau of Street Services. There's still some conversation going on about the impact of removing parking spaces to allow restaurants, for instance, to use parking spaces. And the notion that I'm hearing is that is likely going to go away. And there's going to be more so a sidewalk dining program that this looks more like than, so say, the parklets that we're seeing in the parking zones, because there's safety aspects to those, but there's also revenue impacts from parking meters that's being lost. And that money typically goes directly back to those neighborhoods. So,
so the parking you're talking about is the parking at curbside, not the parking in the parking lots.
Right, the parking on the street. That's the contentious point that will be taken up in the Transportation Committee, most likely next week.
Okay. I'll say Muriel had his hand up, and then John.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that with us. I mean, I think if there's anything that, at least for me, that you could communicate to the councilwoman is, you go out on the street and you see these restaurants that have a little parklet out front where they're able to provide dining in those parking spaces, and just recognizing, a space that we have essentially ceded to two large pieces of metal, to two cars, turned into an outdoor dining space where dozens of people can sit and enjoy themselves and take in how beautiful our city is, and commune with each other and sustain the business. The richness of the culture that you get when you just take away two of those parking spaces, or even just one of them, to the extent that we can allow that kind of thing culturally to be a thing we do in LA, in this beautiful city where the weather's always good, greatly, vastly must outweigh the value that we're giving to two cars to sit there. And so, if there's any way to figure out a way where that restaurant that's definitely gaining more in revenue by having that outdoor seating can cover those parking or whatever it is, I would really think more broadly about what this means for our city to be one where people can eat outside and enjoy and see each other and interact, especially as we're doing so much with all of our transit planning in the next 30 years in the city to make it more walkable. It seems like a real step back to be reprioritizing the street parked cars there. I don't know what the safety concerns are. I imagine they're from the high moving, fast moving cars that are nearby.
Cars crash into them.
Yeah, no, I hear you there. But I think that's a recognizing then okay, what do we have to do to make those traffic corridors more safe? What do we do with the speed limits in this city? Where do we have to do with traffic calming in these areas where you have, if we're going to say that we want, let's say, Adams to be a nice walkable area where people can walk around West Adams and go to restaurants or whatever, should cars still, be able to go down wherever they're going? And so it's a broader conversation. I know there's trade-offs here. I don't want to come across here like I don't get that. But I think as we're thinking more broadly about transportation in the city and making it more walkable and safe, I think all of these things should be taken into consideration together too. It's not the cars, that are hitting people, it's drivers. And so I think recognizing we can change behavior of drivers, I think is a big thing. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you. Nuria, I need you at Transportation Committee to say just that. Just for public comment, you're the guy.
I'd love to. I can make these evenings at night because I got a job. The meetings are during the day. But to the extent that I can submit written comments, I will. If I can call in during the day, I will. But that's how I feel.
Thank you.
Okay. And Hakeem, before I call on John, it would be so great if at these committee meetings, public got 2 minutes apiece, because 1 minute's real hard, because it takes 20 seconds to say who you are. John, you're up.
Okay, Noriel, I couldn't agree with you more. How much revenue does a parking stall make in a day? And if you're not West Hollywood, $20, $15, and think about turning it and just what the alternative to that $20. What is that? And I have 2 anecdotes. Go to San Pedro, active Chamber of Commerce. They had a very coordinated, organized how they inhabited their parking stalls during COVID. It's beautiful. Go up down 6th Street, 6th Street, 7th Street in San Pedro. It's vibrant. They've everything's uniform. They have these uniform wooden decks, and those streets are wonderful to be at now. And if that goes away, boy, is that a mistake, and it will diminish the quality of life that they've established in San Pedro over the past 3 years. Secondly, I work across the street from Destroyer Coffee in Culver City. No parking there, 0. And I'm always astounded that there are parking stalls all up and down the street because everyone walks there. I don't know where. I've always think, God, there's a parking stall right in front of my office with a packed cafe right across the street. And it happens frequently. It's not a fluke. So I think the whole notion that parking is important, especially in the public right of way, which we all own, by the way, I would much rather see it filled with people, regardless of them generating private revenue. It just enhances the public realm and the culture. And I agree with you, Nuriel.
I couldn't agree more. And it's that fundamental argument about that public property being utilized for a private benefit that kind of alludes to the arguments as to why the Department of Transportation is kind of pushing back on explicitly having a program around the utilization of parking stalls. I agree. I love the parklets, but there's some technicalities that are in there that really prohibit the explicit programming of public space for the utilization of private business. And that's just the way things are. But at the same time, this is establishing a fee program that takes into account what that parking revenue might be, so that it's a payment in terms of a permit that kind of compensates for that, to shows that there's still a public benefit in that zone. But if you look at the ordinances through council file, you'll see that it's explicitly programmed as a B permit to utilize street parking, and there's a fee program in there. So that's actually what's being adopted, is the fees to apply for these permits, but the guidelines are going to precipitate separately.
I guess the thing I'd say, that you're renting it to a car for parking space. Are you renting the drive lane for drivers? Are you renting it to a restaurant for a table? I mean, it's all about renting public space for someone else's use for a certain fee. And so I think, and to that point, where there's a will, there's a way. Where there's political will, there's a way. And if it's all about revenue, then make that work. If you can get $15 a day out of a restaurant to cover the parking meter, let's do it.
Okay, well, I have to say that of late, for many, many years, I hadn't even been in Beverly Hills, not been there at all. And recently, for weird reasons, they've been there quite a bit. And what they have done is a lot of those streets, I mean, I'm talking about in the heart of the commercial retail area, they have made now their parking lots, Beverly Hills that owns parking lots, they're free, during the day, which is amazing. Most of the street curb space is taken up by restaurants in the street. There's still as much traffic as ever, but I think that city made a decision that not receiving revenue from either parking meters or parking garages was still beneficial because they're probably getting so much more sales tax revenue from opening, making these businesses succeed. Or they're rich. I mean, that's maybe they need it. But the way they've got it set up, the sidewalks, the wide sidewalks are still wide sidewalks. There's just dining tables on either side, closer to the restaurant frontages and to the outside the street, and it seems to work out very nicely. So anyway, so the question is, John, you're on mute.
What might be a
well, what's our position on? I mean, we don't have to decide tonight, but we would have to decide on February 1. Also, February 1 will be. Oh no, we're good. We won't be in person yet. The hearing is February 8th. This is on the planning department ordinance, and the last day to comment is February 24th. So if UNNC is going to make any comments at all, we'd have to have approved those comments, or the gist of them anyway, on February 2nd. So I don't, just because I love outdoor dining doesn't mean UNNC is supportive of this as presented. And again, my concern, just overarching, is that the different departments are not together creating a single program. They are kind of just creating programs based on what their responsibilities are. And we are hoping for the best that it will integrate properly. But I think my comment would be, personally, that doesn't seem the best approach.
So, any other? Sorry, Laura, I'm getting taken.
No, please go ahead. I presented. I'm not in charge.
Anyone else have any comments about the direction we might want to go in on this, Chantel? You're on mute, Chantel.
Okay, I just have one question. Has anyone surveyed the restaurants and the businesses to see what they're experiencing in terms of the traffic that comes in, the persons that come in to visit the restaurant, in terms of how they're experiencing getting to the restaurant, parking, or if they're walking? I wonder if restaurants could take like maybe a survey. How do you get here?
Okay, well, funny you should ask. The survey was created and taken, and the survey results are also in our agenda packet.
Oh, nice.
And it's 2,500 participants have taken advantage of the program since it was introduced. And the survey had responses from 308 unique business owners and 2,775 individual respondents from the general public.
Wow.
And I'm just reading the summary here. It's a 7-page survey, and I am not going to read the whole thing, but it's overwhelmingly positive. And yes, you can read the answers. And and of the 308 restaurants that responded, 299 are currently participating in the program. 9 of them exited the program. So I guess they liked it.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It sounds great.
So any other comments except my thought is we don't have to act on it tonight, but we should act on it next time. So rather than start the conversation over, what we could do is take the temperature of the room and we might go, we might draft something just as a position, so we don't have to scramble and create something from whole cloth that night. But so I've heard from Chantel, Nariel, me, Laura. Anyone else on the floor have any comments that might be useful for the council district and what might inform our motion?
No hands.
So just based on the comments received, none of which were against this, what I hear is that we are generally supportive of expanding the opportunity for restaurants to occupy both private and public land, to expand seating, and based on the rules that are already set forth. It sounds like we would prefer, to Laura, your comment, that that all the departments work together to make it cohesive. I think to my comment and yours, Hakeem, that sort out the revenue and how that I'd be interested not to have the parking meter folks win out over other folks. That there's a discussion and that's revenue side of it is sorted out, and it's not people getting into their corners protecting their sources of revenue. And that there's a real will to do this and to do it right, and to accentuate, for Nariel's comment, enhance our culture, especially our local culture, so we can walk places and have pleasant places to go that we don't need to drive or park to. Got them. So that would be my somewhat my summary and a little bit of subjectivity into it. Thank you, Teresa. I see your thumb.
So John, to make it relatively easy for February 1, could you and I just work on a sort of a advanced motion, for, just so it's an item that's not necessarily a consent item on February 1 and 2, but at least not take another 40 minutes.
Yep. And I don't think we need to vote on that. I think we can write something that we think was what we heard tonight, and then discuss it further. And if there are any changes or anyone wants to present something different, so when anyone in the audience has a totally different take on it, please bring something to the next meeting. But since there's no dissent from what I just said, I think we can just write something that summarizes that and bring it forth.
And Hakeem, I think individually we can, those of us who have time could to go to that committee meeting, but UNNC can't present an official anything because the board has to vote.
Okay, understood. Well, I'm gonna hop off because it's time for me to go home and take care of my dog. And I'm still stuck here in City Hall. So I appreciate you guys and thank you for having me again. Laura, John, I sent you my briefing notes for all the 2023 legislation that's going into effect around housing and development. So I hope that's helpful. And if you have any questions, please reach out.
Okay. And Hakeem, I do want to say that Teresa and a few others, but I think Teresa's the prime mover, have already worked out a good system for small meetings on the hybrid Zoom. So I hope when we start, you can participate in that and then share with your people how good it is. Because she said it was interesting. I'm going to tell you the same thing I said last night. It was like magic. It was like there was a human being operating a camera and following the speakers. And I didn't know it was just the AI on the system. I mean, it's crazy good.
Cool. All right. Well, looking forward to seeing you guys next time. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Hakeem.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have an approach to that. I put my email address in the chat. If anyone wants to become part of UNNC and know how to reach us, please do so. And there's Laura's as well, because he's very straightforward. And so please reach out to us. We'd love to have anyone that has participated tonight continue to participate in the discussions we have, because they're always good. Teresa had old business.
Yes, so we have one more item.
Item number 7, I believe it is. I don't have the agenda right in front of me, but that's anything about old cases or past cases that we want to discuss. Teresa?
Thank you, John. Earlier this week regarding 1848 West Adams Boulevard, the West Adams West Adams Neighborhood Association and another organization filed an appeal against this development. It was 10 small homes, but in actuality, it was 96 bedrooms and 96 bathrooms. Even though they didn't say that, it was really co-dwelling units. They filed a sequel appeal. It went before Plum, and the Plum Committee supported the appeal, sent it back to the South LA Area Planning Commission. I bring this up because on the avenues at 2516, I believe, we have an infill. The previous owner burned down the house, a long story, but there's a developer that's putting up what he calls a single family home, but it's 14 bedrooms and 14 bathrooms. It's been working its way through HPOZ. You know, he keeps coming back with more and more reviews, but there's really, you know, how the HPOZ works. They can't tell him that you can't build this if it meets all the other requirements, but it certainly is a co-dwelling building, and we're keeping an eye on it. And it appears that, especially Councilmember Harris Dawson is just not does not appreciate that, because he told the applicant, if that's what you're going to do, you need to present your application as such. Don't try to act like you're bringing in housing when it really is co-dwelling. So I just say that because it is something that we're very concerned about. That block is an R1, that 13th Avenue is R1. So we're just very concerned about it, and just want you to know what's happening with that.
Great, thanks, Teresa. Yeah, really tricky situation when you get it form-based, which is how much volume do you get, versus use-based. If it's, you know, if you have a 14-person single family, technically that's a use that's allowed. So it start kind of just crossing intents. And I think what Councilmember Harris Dawson said, just be clean with what you're trying to do and don't call it something that it's not, and then deal with it in that direction.
Well, John, I feel like what's happened, the proposal on 13th Avenue reminds me of the notorious Tower of 29th Street, the thing that helped create your HPOZ in Jefferson Park in the first place. Because remember, it was Building and Safety ultimately decided it was no longer a single family house, but instead it was flexible rental unit. And it sounds to me, I know the language has changed, the laws have changed, but it's hard to know when a single family R1 zone is no longer a single family R1 zone, but it's pretty easy to know that if what you're building is, cohabited room by room rentals, transient, so that, people come and go, not necessarily overnight, that is not the definition of a single family home. You know, if a family with 14 members and each who wants their own bathroom lives in a big old house, that's different. So how do you measure intent? I think that's the issue. How do you measure intent? So
part of the intent is that this developer has done this in other areas in other countries. So, that's
good to know.
Yeah. So, but I'm just mentioning it to you, it's still going through HPOZ. If it gets out of there and it has to move forward, then certainly the avenues will be looking, we'll bring it up to the committee to have further discussion.
I think this is becoming general, not specific to this project, but what is the planning and zoning? Planning zones essentially involved with quality of life outside of your property, how you're affecting the quality of life of your neighbors in your neighborhood and your community. And if the look of the building, the volume of the building is the same, whether it's a 14-person family or 14-person co-dwelling, if the building looks the same and has the same setbacks and the same height and the same paint colors and the same everything, how is that essentially different than the relationship of the occupants?
Well, here's the answer, John.
Wait, I'm not just siding on anything, but on either side. But how is that defined, and how does the relationship of the people within affect the quality of life of the people without? Laura.
Well, I was going to say, but it's also the jurisdictional authority. Who has jurisdiction on ensuring that the quality of life of the people within is a good quality of life? Is it building and safety, because that's a single family house, or is it the housing department who focuses more on tenants? So it's not very straightforward.
Yeah.
Those things are changing on the ground much faster than the city's laws are changing.
So to your
And I
point,
would
you're
also-
right. If it was a multi-family rental, the housing department would have
Right.
jurisdiction about how the paint is, how life safety things are taken care of, and bugs and paint and accessibility and all that things. There'd be no accessibility issues with a single family house, but it would be for multifamily. So it's very interesting what it is. Teresa, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, for the residents, this could be 14 adults with 14 cars. I mean, we've just heard Noriel and Chantal talk about riding buses and public transportation, but in reality, this could be 14 adults with 14 cars on a block that doesn't have that much parking anyway. And the difficulty of maneuvering in that area on that block with the hill and everything, I don't know. It's a good point, John. What is the difference? Except this is an R1 block, and there aren't any houses that have 14 bedrooms and 14 baths on this block. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, I know we have some mansions around here that probably have maybe that many. But I'm just bringing it up to say that it appears that the Plum Committee is not in support of developers trying to push these through without calling it what it is. And if this makes it out of HPOZ, we certainly, in the avenues, would like to bring it forth and would look to discuss it further with the Planning and Zoning Committee.
Chantal.
I just have one statement to say: the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And I think when I heard you say, well, they have a history, this person has a history of doing that, it just stood out for me.
Yeah, it's about taking, I think Laura's point is well taken.
Yeah, Lawrence.
The laws aren't keeping up with what people are able to do to circumvent the law, and then to identify it and call it what it is, and then let the applicable laws apply to what it is, versus some, as you say, Chantal, there seems to be a pattern of taking advantage of laws because they know that nothing can be done. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and John, one of the things, guys, that I've discovered is that, and I'll phrase it like this: it's almost like you reach a certain point with the city, and then it's like you fall off a cliff. Because once you reach a certain point, from my knowledge, and you guys have much more experience than me, I'm just coming from the vantage point of a tenant who is reaching out and trying to find answers. And because the building is designated as one thing, however, it's not being enforced. Because even the building I know a building who's been without an on-site manager, which is required by the city, but there's no enforcement. And so what I'm noticing is that even though what you just said, like the laws aren't keeping up with the changes in the city fast enough, there just is not enough accountability. And the attention to what the building is so that it's in compliance. And I'm noticing there's a disparity between those things, which is causing a lot of challenges to people's peace of mind, stability, and ability to know who to contact if there are emergencies and things like that.
Thanks, Chantel. Donna.
As far as 13th and the idea of the 14 rooms, we've had problems with people. That particular development is person is very rude, very obnoxious in the way they present at HPOZ as well. Secondly, the idea of having that type of setup, they can rent them out nightly and it can become a motel, basically. And it has happened, rooming house. So the quality of life for the community is something that we do have to definitely pay attention to. And that particular development, we've had them before all of this was okay to do. People were cutting up spaces all over the place and turning them into rentable spaces in order to make money. So we just have to keep an eye. And we have a real concern in the avenues, and hopefully we will be able to get some support outside, because I believe they're going to push it. As you said, his past is an indicator of his future pursuit of trying to get into this neighborhood and do what he wants to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Any final comments or any past issues from, thanks for opening up that can, Teresa. That was a good start of or a continuation of the discussion. Any other old business or any further comments? We're coming right up on our time here. Okay.
John, can I ask a question? Just a simple question. How involved is the committee with like from what I'm learning, the mayor's office makes develops the ordinances and things like that? I'm not sure. I'm very new to that. Mm-hmm. How do we help to close the gap, knowing that sometimes the final decision can rest with inspectors and the city, but the streets are moving much quicker than the ordinances or different things like that? What's our role, or what's the UNNC's role in helping to bridge that gap?
So it's the ways we can respond are if there are problem properties specifically, and if there's a complaint, we can facilitate getting that complaint heard by either contacting the council office or whatever we do for whatever avenue. The other way we can affect change is if there are ordinances or preludes to ordinances. Laura, I'm thinking about maybe just the housing element. We give input that might lead to a law, and then before that law is passed, we will be able to give input to the city council, which passes the laws and ordinances, what our opinion is, and we can do that in multiple ways. We can write letters to the council member to affect their vote. Like Hakeem was here listening on behalf of our council member. So we're a conduit for our constituents to reach the city departments, and either proactively or reactively. As far as how we contact things like LADBS, which is the inspectors and the enforcers, it's a little more tricky because the way they are controlled would be by ordinances or being getting word from the council members. But we don't have any direct conduits to say the inspectors. The inspectors live in a world of their own, as is DWP and many other city agencies. So I hope that answered your question, even though there's not really an answer. Laura, do you have anything else to say to that?
Well, over time, occasionally UNNC helps to initiate a program, like the CPIO for the residential overlay, that kind of grew out of stuff we were doing. And the Washington Boulevard, CPIO was just a dumb name. It's community plan implementation ordinance, but what it's become is sort of kind of different kinds of specific plans overlaying either commercial streets or residential neighborhoods. And that a lot of that grew out of stuff we had proposed unsuccessfully for our neighborhoods, but it morphed into that. And Teresa took off running on a issue related to trees and brought it to a larger group of other stakeholders and tree experts. And there is, I'm saying it wrong, but there is a new, it's not an ordinance yet, but a new program that moves the evaluation of trees up to the front of an application process rather than at the end. And that happened because of a case here in UNNC where when all was said and done, nobody knew about a grove of sycamore trees that were being, well, demolished. That's not really what you say about trees, but like a house being demolished, the trees are being demolished and they hadn't been reviewed at the front end. So there are lots of things the neighborhood council can do, but much of what we do is actually look at specific cases, which we didn't really do tonight, and weigh in on them. So, that's our primary function at this committee.
And the starting point is coming here and expressing what the concern is. And then we, whether it's reactive or proactive or an observation, and then we can see what we can do to find the right conduit to get to affect change.
And having meetings like this helps us set our own policies so that when we do have a development proposal before us, we kind of have a good sense of where we're coming from to begin with.
And I can't can't overstate how important that Hakeem was here for most of our meeting. He will directly report to Heather Hutt, our council person. So that's really great for us. Donna.
It's so important because when he sits here or anyone else comes to planning and zoning and listens to the fact that we care, we're concerned, and we're knowledgeable.
Yep.
They don't listen to you if you don't portray that side of you. Otherwise, they do whatever I find they can get away with, or they do as little as possible. I'm sorry, departments since COVID have become COVID oriented and they hide behind it. So it's helpful for us to be here and have those conduits to push the necessary agenda for the community.
Yeah, I see. It's amazing. I think that I didn't know all this was taking place. And I feel like you guys are like superheroes behind the scene protecting Gotham City. So it's very humbling to be here, to know that this has been taking place so long. And yeah, I really appreciate all of your time and effort. So I just wanted to say that.
Please come back every first and third Wednesday. We're here. Yeah, and the council members. The council is more, we're a council centric city, as the council calls the shots and the mayor is a little bit less powerful than maybe in other cities. So the fact that we have a conduit into our council member, that they can affect change at the ordinance level at the city council floor based on what they heard from us. And to Donna's point, we're informed. We keep our wits about us and we argue, we are knowledgeable about laws and how to approach things in a way that is effective to get change done versus being shut out. So
I need to say we need to end the meeting.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, 9:06. Ooh, we've been so good for about a year about ending at 1:09. So anyway, if there's no other comments, I'll bring this meeting to a close. Thank you all for showing up. Nice, robust conversation. And we'll see you at the next meeting. Okay.
Great
Thanks,
meeting,
everybody.
Laura and John. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will end the meeting now.